Did the Sharks give up too early on goalie Adin Hill, or is this a symptom of bigger issues in the goaltending department for the Sharks? Today on Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young. I'm help cover the Sharks over at San Jose Hockey Now. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen, proudly a part of the Locked On Network, where we cover your team every day. If you want to be an everydayer, all you gotta do is just follow along wherever you get podcasts or subscribe on YouTube as well. And we're going to be digging into kind of one of the questions on the tip of a lot of Sharks fans right now, especially with the way Adin Hill has been playing in the playoffs for the Vegas Golden Knights. And that is, did the Sharks give up on Adin Hill too early, or was just a guy who's playing on a better team right now and is playing kind of out of his mind in the playoffs, as we've seen many goalies do. And then sometimes they turn back into a pumpkin. Sometimes it's the start of a career. Who knows? How we all know goalies are very fickle. But I wanted to kind of dig into the Adin Hill question and then look at maybe if the Sharks should have traded Reimer or Kaapo Kahkonen, or is this just a deeper issue with the Sharks where they just can't do anything with goaltending? So let's first start off by looking at how Adin Hill has played the last couple seasons for not only for the Sharks, but for the Sharks, the Vegas Golden Knights, and for the Arizona Coyotes. So this season for the Vegas Golden Knights, Adin Hill, 27 games, 915 save percentage. This is all in the regular season. So 245 goals against average. Goals allowed, he had 62. Expected goals allowed against was 62.87. He had goals saved above expected at a 0.87. So he was basically kind of an average goaltender, at least when it comes to the goals saved above expected department. A 729 high danger save percentage. So keep that number in mind here. Just that's 729. If you look at his fantasy stats, the team did a good job of, especially in front of him, helping to limit the opportunities, and Adin Hill kind of performed up to expectations for those. He really helped them on the power play, where the Vegas's power play, or on the penalty kill, my bad, where Vegas's penalty kill was a little bit below average, but he played above expectation in that department. So we see Adin Hill going from one of the worst teams in the NHL in the San Jose Sharks, put him on a good team with better surroundings, and he plays up to those expectations. Going back to the Sharks, 2021-22 season, he played 25 games, 906 save percentage, 266 goals against per average. Goals allowed, he has 61. Expected goals against, 56.91. So he gave up 4.1 more goals than expected and a high danger save percentage of 625. So again, in this last season with the Golden Knights, basically the same amount of games played. His high danger save percentage increased by 100 points versus percentage points. And that's probably why all of his other numbers look so much better, right? If you can, that high danger save percentage. Looking at his fantasy stats, the team in front of Adin Hill was actually not as bad. They were good defensively, right? We know Bob Bugner wanted to play every game 3-2, play kind of more shutdown defense. But Adin Hill's numbers, at least his fantasy stats, weren't too bad. The penalty kill especially was very, very good in front of Adin Hill, but Adin Hill didn't have – he performed below expectations on the penalty kill. Going into his season with the Coyotes, where the Sharks acquired him before the expansion draft deadline, 2020-2021, He played 19 games with the Coyotes, had a .913 save percentage, 274 goals against average, 43 goals allowed. Expected goals against was 43.03. So his goals saved above expected was .03. I screwed up there. At 718 high danger save percentage. In his fancy stats, the team in front of him and Adin Hill basically performed kind of together. He was much better on the PK than the team in front of him. So what does this all mean for Adin Hill? So we can kind of see with Hill where he plays better when the team in front of him is a better team, right? That Coyotes team wasn't that great, but he kind of played up to expectations, right? The Sharks, we know we've watched the Sharks the past few years. They're not a very good team. Vegas, much better team. They number one seed in the West. They're one win away from going to the Stanley Cup. And I know they've been dealing with a lot of injuries, especially in the goalie department. They've played, I think, 4 or 5 goalies this year. But Hill's been playing his best here in the playoffs. So we have seen that Adin Hill, he's been a solid goaltender, despite whatever's kind of been in front of him. And when you put better pieces in front of him, he's played up to those expectations for the most part. But, and even looking back, right, even if you go back to when the Sharks acquired Adin Hill. So they acquired Adin Hill for a second-round pick from the Arizona Coyotes. That was part of the Coyotes had to move Adin Hill because they didn't want to expose him in the expansion draft and let the Kraken kind of take him for free. They wanted to try to get something for it, right? The Sharks took a swing, and I'm all for the Sharks continuing to take swings at goalies until they find one. We know they're going to probably be taking one in the draft, and I would actually be shocked if they don't take one in the draft. And they're going to be getting active, I think, in free agency to try to find an NHL caliber goalie this offseason, right? But we've seen the Sharks have tried to do as much as they can when either trading, acquiring, or developing goalies, and they're at this point they continue to just be bad at it. So, but I think the biggest question going forward was, did the Sharks give up too early on Adin Hill? And before we get in, I think to look at if they gave up too early, I think we need to look at the other options that they had, right? We need to look at how Reimer and Kaapo Kahkonen have performed basically since they have been, kind of look at their seasons before San Jose and then look at their seasons with San Jose and see if this is just a trend with the Sharks where, again, goaltenders maybe just come to die in San Jose, or if this is a bigger Sharks issue or type of thing. So before, though, we get into Reimer and Kaapo Kahkonen and see if maybe the Sharks should have tried to trade one of those guys, do need to take a quick break, talk to you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. So if you guys know, for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit, right? You can't have 12 star forwards, as much as fun as it sounds, or 6 Erik Karlssons on the defense. You need to have guys where everyone kind of fits their role. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle, right? Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guarantee Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. All you have to do is just add your car to the My Garage and look for the green check to make sure that your part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop at eBay Motors, you're going to win. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when your parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guarantee Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Okay. So how do Reimer and Kaapo Kahkonen kind of compare? So want to look at how Reimer played, because before he came to the Sharks in free agency, he played with Carolina, and that Carolina team was playoff team, right? But they knew Reimer kind of wasn't the answer. And then Kaapo Kahkonen, how he played for the Wild. And then as they kind of moved on for him, because as I kind of explained before, but I don't think Kaapo Kahkonen fit the Wild's timeline, right? They're a win now team, and Kaapo Kahkonen still feels like he was a couple years away from kind of developing into a starter for the Wild. So let's dig into the numbers for Reimer and Kaapo Kahkonen and look at their analytics and see what type of players that they have been. So Reimer, actually, it's kind of crazy to think about. The Panthers were bad defensively in front of Reimer, and he kind of bailed them out, at least at 5-on-5. Shorthanded, and this is the 2020-2021 season. Also the bubble years. So it's a little tough to kind of, when you're playing the same 7 teams over and over, a little bit tough there to kind of, you have to kind of take these numbers with a grain of salt, right? The Carolina's penalty kill was pretty good, but Reimer maybe kind of played below expectations for them. When Reimer signs with the Sharks in the 2021 offseason, defensively, the team in front of him was okay-ish, and he kind of played up to his expectations. Shorthanded, James Reimer was outstanding that season for the 21-22 Sharks. He really propped up their penalty kill and made them look way, way better than they actually were. If you're not watching on YouTube, basically blue bars, just beautiful blue bars from James Reimer. He was absolutely outstanding and masked a lot of the penalty. The penalty kill was pretty good, but he made them look way, way better than they actually were. So, and then last season, 5-on-5, the team in front of him, not that great, but Reimer fell off a cliff last season, right? And you wonder if, especially the year before, where he played a career high in games, getting a little bit older, all that fun stuff, new system, not that great. Shorthanded, Reimer continued to be excellent, though, for the Sharks, where, again, the team he made the shorthanded team look much, much better than they were previously. As for Kaapo Kahkonen, so his last full season with the Wild in that 2020-21 season where they were playing the Pacific, they were in the Honda West division. The team in front of him was amazing defensively, and he was abysmal for them, both even strength and 5-on-5. When he got the next season, before he got traded, combination of the Wild and the Sharks season, the teams in front of him were solid and he played well. And, both even strength and 5-on-5, kind of matched the team, much like what we saw from Adin Hill. But then this last season, the team in front of Kaapo Kahkonen was okay, at least at 5. They played better in front of him than they did James Reimer, but his numbers were abysmal when it came to 5-on-5. And shorthanded, the team played pretty well in front of him, and he played about up to expectations for those situations. So, I think the big takeaway from looking at those is, how much the Sharks are just like, it feels like goalies play really well, and then they get to San Jose and things fall off a cliff. And, we'll get into why that may be here in a minute, but even looking at like their kind of just their regular stats, right? So Reimer, his last season with Carolina, 906 save percentage, 266 goals against in 22 games. For the Sharks, that 21-22, he had played 48 games, 911 save percentage, 290 goals against. And then last year in 43 games for the Sharks, he had 890 save percentage and 343 goals against. And you see the same thing with Kaapo Kahkonen, right? His season with the Wild before he got traded, 902 save percentage, 288 goals against. And then in 25 games for the Wild, he had a 910 save percentage, 287 goals against. 11 games for the Sharks when after he got traded, 916 save percentage and 286 goals against. And then last year, 883 and a 385, just an absolute dud. And I know the Sharks don't put themselves in the best situation. They were bottom half of the league when it comes to giving up high danger chances. We know the Sharks defensively weren't the greatest team, but these numbers that the goalies are posting are just abysmal, right? Like these numbers are you this can't keep happening, right? This isn't the sample size of just Sharks goalies just being absolutely horrendous when it comes to, we're seeing different coaches, we're seeing different systems, and goalies numbers are still being horrendous, which is, I think, going to be begging a much bigger question here in a second. So, but back to Adin Hill. All right. So remember going into last offseason. So they had just acquired Kaapo Kahkonen. Yeah, James Reimer with 1 year left on his deal. And then you had Adin Hill, who also had 1 year left on his deal. And the Sharks kind of had a question to decide, right? Who do you trade? And looking back, right, you feel like they made the right decision. Kaapo Kahkonen, like we said, his numbers were great after he came over to San Jose. They were better than what we saw in Minnesota. James Reimer had a really good season for the Sharks. And Adin Hill, I mean, his season was okay, but he missed basically the last half of the season after hurting himself. Came back, played one game against the Kings, had a shutout, and then we didn't see him again. I mean, I know it's easy to play revisionist history and say, like, wow, they should have kept Adin Hill, but who would, going back, like, it feels like they made the right decision, right? You were going to bank on Adin Hill. Again, it's not like Adin Hill's played a bunch of games. He's played 27 games for Vegas this year. Like, he still hasn't been able to stay healthy for them, right? Wasn't able to stay healthy for him and for the Sharks when he was there. Reimer this year, we saw it, took a step back, dealt with some injuries. Kaapo Kahkonen, who knows, right? He definitely took a huge step back from what we saw from the the small sample size from him from the previous season. But this looks like it might not be a Sharks. It might not be the goalie's fault here. Like, I know the systems are different, stuff like that. Maybe this is a Sharks issue. Maybe they don't have the right people or the right development or whatever it is, looking at the goalies and making the correct goalie decisions. And I know there's been a huge change, especially with the front office, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we need to ask that question: is the reason why the Sharks can't find a goalie? Is this because the system in place, or is this because they don't have the proper people trying to look for the goalies and asking the right questions and knowing what they're looking for when they're scouting to make sure that it fits the system? So before we look into that question and look at the people in that area, want to take a quick break. Thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. We're proudly a part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. If you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just come back tomorrow. Tomorrow we have another draft profile coming on. And then I think later this week, we're probably going to maybe start looking at some free agents, potential free agents out there. I know the Sharks do have a little bit of cap space. So I know Mike Grier is going to try to start adding some more pieces. Maybe we'll do a mock draft. Look at some potential who could be there for the Sharks. End of the first round, beginning of the second round. So plenty of fun stuff coming up this week. And then we're also going to be looking at goalies that the Sharks could be drafting. So plenty of good stuff here at Locked On Sharks. So just make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube as well. All right. So I think we have to look at who's in charge, right? We know Mike Grier stepped in last year, was hired as the GM, founded some of his own pieces, some of his own guys, but one person did remain on with in the front office, and that would be one Evgeny Nabokov. So Nabokov, of course, played with the Sharks, drafted by the Sharks, played with the Sharks, was big part of their kind of success in the, late 2000s, 2010, kind of beginning of like the Thornton run, et cetera, right? But after his retirement, he joined the front office. 2015, 2016, joined the team as the goaltending development coach, specialist assignment scout. All right. And he's been with the Sharks since, either working as a scout or a development coach or an assistant coach. He's been kind of working with them, and then got promoted to director of goaltending this season, off season. But Shang Peng wrote a great article on San Jose Hockey Now about basically the Sharks' inability to draft and develop goalies. They've been the league's worst, among the league's worst at drafting goalies. So if you have not read this, go check it out. San Jose Hockey Now. It's totally for free. But some of the guys, right? Mike Robinson, Jane Kupski, Zachary Iman, Ben Gaudreau, Mason Bopet. These are guys that they've drafted, basically since 2015. Zachary Iman not going to make that. Jay Kupski not making the NHL and didn't make the NHL. Mike Robinson not making the NHL. Ben Gaudreau, they didn't even want to sign him, put him back in the draft, right? Mason Bopet had a terrible year this last season. Some of that's not his fault. He was on a very, very bad team, but this team has just struggled to find, draft, and develop goaltenders. I know goaltenders take forever to develop and stuff like that, but that's this, right? You have to, in the past, since 2015, in the past 8 years now, we haven't had one even close to sniffing the NHL, right? And you look at how goalies have come and gone from the Sharks, right? Adin Hill, I know, again, easy to point out. Yeah, the Sharks made a mistake by trading Adin Hill. Again, Kaapo Kahkonen played really well in his short time here. James Reimer had you could argue one of his best seasons, in his time in the season, last season. Adin Hill missed half the season, and the Sharks were just happy to get a 4th-round pick. I go back and say I thought that was a fair trade. Kyle and I used to joke about Adin Hill had the slowest glove hand in the West, et cetera. But this feels like a Sharks issue. It feels like I know last year they also hired David Quinn, hired Thomas Spear, and you could see a little bit of tweaks and changes here with some of the guys, but like this feels like it's a Sharks issue, and until I think they get the right people in place, how can you expect, or how can you think that the goaltending is going to ever be a positive for the Sharks, right? Martin Jones, the first 3 seasons of Martin Jones were great. And then he fell off a cliff and turned into a pumpkin. But guess what? He played really well for the Kraken this season, right? Had a solid season for the Flyers and kind of like earned that contract from the Kraken. It feels like a Sharks issue. And I know it's not going to help having a bad team in front of goaltenders, but like at some point, right? At some point, you have to kind of the goalies have to make a stop at some save, and at some point, right? And I don't feel confident in the Sharks' ability to draft and develop, and then also help out goaltenders in front of them, even when they get even NHL goalies, right? Whatever they're doing, the coaching that's there. I don't know if they have the right people in place right now. So, because I feel like David Quinn's system, I like David Quinn's system. We saw a lot of the defenders have their best years ever, right? I know the offense struggled at times, but we saw pieces, we saw stuff there, right? You did see, they did a good job of creating high danger chances. They just don't have the skill players right now to capitalize on those high danger chances. You feel like the system's there. And if the Sharks could just get average goaltending, which is crazy to say, but just average goaltending, this team would be at least an average to above average team, despite some of the deficiencies they have when it comes to top end talent and, depth here and there. But, there's still enough pieces where this team wouldn't be one of the worst, the fourth worst team in the NHL. So, but I think I know Mike Grier is new, right? He stepped into the job kind of late last season, kind of had to go with the things that are, a lot of the pieces maybe still there. But if the Sharks continue to struggle to, develop and coach up goaltending, I think you got to look at who's been the guy that's been there throughout this whole ride at some point. So, and maybe Nabokov just goes maybe to more of a whatever type of role, if it's more of a consulting type of situation. But I think you need to find a coach or someone can kind of know the ins and outs of the technical abilities of goaltending, because that was never Nabokov's thing, right? He was more of an athletic goalie, trying to find a guy who can kind of be more that technical side to kind of come in and especially help these young goaltenders with the technical part of the game. So, and, making sure you're in the right spot and you're not, going down too early and all that fun stuff. Right. But so long story short, I still don't think the Sharks gave up too early on Adin Hill. You look back at that last summer at this time, right? And you had three goalies between Reimer, Kaapo Kahkonen, and Adin Hill. And I feel like they still made the right choice. I think Adin Hill was just in a much better situation. He still hasn't played more than 30 games in a season, but he's playing out of his mind right now in the playoffs, so good for him. But I think this is a bigger Sharks issue that they're going to eventually, I think they're going to have to figure out, especially as they continue their quest to try to find a goalie, because other than, it's been a while since Martin Jones, Martin Jones was the guy. So I think that is the big thing, is can they find a goalie, whether it's trading for one and making sure he actually fits into the system and doesn't regress like we've seen every goalie recently, or can they draft and develop a guy to actually be a guy? So, yeah, I'm worried about the goaltending, to be honest. So, but that's going to do it for me today. We'll be back tomorrow. Like I said, we have another draft profile coming on. So make sure you guys are here for that. We're going to be talking about goalies probably for Thursday's episode. Maybe start looking at some free agents, do a mock draft. Plenty of good stuff coming up at Locked On Sharks. So make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. You can follow me on Twitter at MyFryHole. And we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, bye, friends.